We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Here comes a new challenger!
Hey, what's up? I'm Warren.
I'm Aaron.
We're going to take that again, Aaron. God damn it.
That was my cue.
Hey.
I took it. There's a delay. There's
I'm
a lag
Warren.
on my end.
I am
I'm Aaron.
Warren. This is Movie Talk. Aaron and I argue about movies, we critique movies, and we review films. Today we're discussing a film starring Gary Nohely, Eric Sundquist, and Liz Clare called Warpath.
Hi, I'm Casey de Fremery. I'm the writer and director of Warpath.
Behave yourself today, Aaron.
Be in your best goddamn behavior. I'm Warren. This is Aaron. Welcome to Movie Talk.
We're back.
I'm taking this again. No, we're not back. I'm doing this again. Damn it.
I can't jump on command like that.
This should make you feel better about us critiquing and reviewing your film. All right, taking this again. I'm Warren. That's Aaron.
I'm Aaron.
It's amateur hour over here at Movie Talk, but we are so glad that somebody can raise and elevate the level of production here because we got a special guest today, and our special guest is Casey de Fremery. Casey, welcome to Movie Talk. Glad to have you. Welcome to the square.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, of course. So
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for entering the arena. For those of you who don't know, we discuss films. We're just kind of two guys on a couch or now a digital box chatting about movies we've seen recently, discussing them and reviewing them. You know, we liked it, we didn't like it, we would change this, do that, XYZ. And this is the first time that we've actually got someone not only involved with the film that we're discussing sitting in a guest chair, but also writer and director of the film in the chair. Casey, did I get that right? What is your association with this film?
I'm the writer, director. I also edited the movie. I was also the caterer. I made some generous donations to the budget, like pretty much everything except wardrobe and makeup.
How much of your life in making this film did this film consume? It sounds like you wore many, many hats.
For anyone who doesn't know about the movie, should we just mention like what the plot is just so they know like...
Oh, please. Absolutely. I'm sorry. I am just like so eager to dive in.
We're pretty hyped.
You know what? I leave the honors to you, Casey, please.
Yeah, so basically Warpath is about a contract killer named Joel who is kind of at a crossroads in his life. He's, sort of in his like early 30s, and basically he's trying to decide if he's going to continue on living as a contract killer. And what happens is that he's given this job, like a really risky one, to kill a police officer who may actually be able to take down the whole business that he works with, like all of his friends and all of his allies. And things go fairly wrong. And in all the fracas that comes up after it, basically his wife gets kidnapped, he's beaten down, but he escapes, and he goes on a roaring rampage of revenge against all the people who betrayed him over a very long weekend.
I got to get you to pump the brakes. You don't want to give away what you can sell, man. This film is out on where is this film
Amazon
available?
Prime.
So if anybody hasn't seen it, where can they find and purchase?
Yeah, it's available for rental or purchase on platforms like iTunes, Amazon, YouTube, Vudu. It's also on DVD. Like there is an audio commentary track as well embedded within the film. So there is a physical copy of it. The easiest way to watch it though is that on Amazon Prime it is available for streaming.
Nice. Did you have a hand in editing the commentary as well? Just out of curiosity.
I did. So the commentary was with me and Gary, the lead actor in the film, and basically we went to like a little small Burbank studio. It was also during COVID, so we had to be several feet away. Gary was like double masked. I had a mask on, so I had to kind of try to get the muffles out as much as possible. But yeah, I edited it together. All I literally did was I sent it to the DVD guy to author it and get it linked up, and it's there. So it's like half the point of making a movie is to make the commentary track afterwards, for the 5 people who buy it. So,
dude, I wish I was the
sixth.
Commentary track, the anecdotes and the things that happen that enable a scene or a shot to take place are things that I'm really interested to learn about. And that's why I'm glad to have you here, because we are just going to bombard you with questions, as you can see. But the first question I wanted to really ask you about is you would consider yourself an independent filmmaker, yeah? Yeah,
that's basically the way I was kind of brought up. And if I had money or I didn't, I was pursuing making stuff, and things ended up happening that way. So yeah, I am an independent filmmaker. Proud and proud.
Hell yeah.
That's amazing.
But the core question there is, you grew up in a really blue collar household, right? If people aren't familiar, I'd ask if you're willing to share, please share. But your family definitely blue collar. So when you decided to go into the arts, right? Snowflake, what was the reaction? What was your first instance of it? Like, how did that go over? Or are they supportive? Where was your first exposure to it?
So as a little bit of a context, my mom's a truck driver and my dad works in construction or did work in construction. So I basically was about as blue collar as it got. I remember very vividly when I was a kid, I said the F word a lot because I was hearing an argument between the two of them. So I was just like blah, 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 blah. Got in a lot of trouble. But, so
What do you mean
and I saw the R-rated
like
movies. I also saw R-rated movies a lot earlier than I should. But, if I didn't, Warpath might not exist. So it worked out there. Like, I think my mom always fondly remembers telling me that, like, oh, yeah, when you were like 4 years old, you looked up at me and said, I want to make the movies. And apparently I knew then. My memory is always that I wanted to get into it as soon as I saw Jurassic Park in its opening weekend. And I think a lot of people had that same visceral experience to that movie. Basically from there, I never really veered. Like I went to, like college and tried out a few different things, but it was always like in support of whatever I was doing film wise. And they were way more supportive than they had any right to be. So my mom really encouraged it. I think my dad was like, yeah, sure. If you want to try it out, like, I don't think he really thought I was going to be able to do it, but I did. I have like extended family that is vaguely kind of in film, but like nothing I do, like there wasn't like, oh, Uncle Bob, he was in film too. It's like everyone has an adult job. So I'm the artist in the immediate family.
That kind of trajectory is one that I can sympathize with because my family's very blue collar as well. And I guess in the effort of being a creative or a talent where acting and filmmaking comes, they don't really legitimize you until they see it on the silver screen, right?
Yeah.
And everything else before that is just like, he's playing around, right? So has the release of Warpath kind of changed the perception of you to your family or just like friends, or like what was that?
I think they started to take me seriously in terms of that dream and that goal like many years ago, because like I've invited them and they've come to like film festival screenings where it's like, oh, there actually is like a short that's on screen. It's like, oh, okay, he did a thing, and it was not and it wasn't too embarrassing. So when I did my very first screening of the movie of Warpath, it was about 3 years ago. I rented out a theater in Livermore where I grew up, and there was a theater where you can just rent a screen for a night, and got all the family out and everything like that. And I think that was a very big experience for them because I hadn't even released a trailer. All they knew was the general basics of what the idea was. And I think that was like, and there was a big rush of euphoria, I think, at least from most of the audience, because they weren't really expecting it. Yeah, so my family has always been really supportive. And I think I'm also one of the only males, at least on my mom's side. I'm one of the only males on my mom's side. I think they gave me a little more rope to be the quirky artist.
This is uncharted ground.
Yeah, man. I mean, for whatever reason, we thank our families for making the choices and releasing the reins that we wouldn't have. I don't know that I would have the patience to release, but tied up in that is the legitimacy of the screen time. And now being stuck in this direct release streaming environment, you still did the festival circuit. You found value there as an independent director. And I think ultimately that's how you wound up on Prime. So my question is that sort of pathway still just as valuable, or would you change it and go direct to Amazon? Like, what would you do now if Warpath was released in 2021, or you were planning that?
I wanted to do the festival route kind of for two reasons. One, that like I've done before and I've always gotten a lot out of it. Even in the bad experiences, I've gotten a lot out of it, especially because one of my things was I always kind of knew the movie was eventually going to be mainly on video on demand, so iTunes, Prime, etc. So I always knew that it was mostly probably going to be a digital release. So I always wanted to at least see it in a theater with people and just gauge everyone's reactions. And like, that's at least a year's worth of film school right there. Just seeing people's shoulders bob up and down, and or when they're getting up, like when they're groaning, when they're laughing, etc. So to me, that was really invaluable, and I knew that was gonna be my best shot at like not so much having a theatrical like run, but at least of being able to see in theaters with, especially with anonymous people who don't know me, engaging what that was like. So now, if I was releasing in 2021, I don't think I'd have any choice but to go try and go directly to distributors and that kind of thing. One of the reasons I also went to the festivals was that I wanted to add some kind of value to it. Like, okay, if I won some awards, if it got in some bigger festivals, that kind of stuff, it only helps you. Like I got lucky because I was touring with the movie in 2019, so it hit like, and I ended my run just before COVID hit. So,
Nice.
And
Lucky is
one of my
right.
big, very lucky. And one of my best life experiences was one of the first screenings I ever had of the movie was at the Chinese Theater in LA. And that was one of my top
Memorable.
5 nights ever. Very
Hell
memorable.
yeah.
And we filled the theater on a Wednesday night at like 9:30 p.m. So that's pretty hard to do, but it was great. And I don't know if the festival route like really made any difference in terms of where I got picked up, which was with a High Octane Productions. So I'll give a little shout out to them. It definitely doesn't hurt. At least shows, okay, some people were willing to take a chance on this movie, and they did. So
Shout out.
yeah. So every movie's different though. So like not every action movie, like I think most action movies don't need a festival run. You got to get your indie street cred somehow.
Yeah, it is a lot of street cred on seeing in the big screen, but the feedback is something that I think I would highlight, right? You don't get that feedback if you go straight to streaming platforms. But that feedback is also a tense moment, and you really test your mettle on, your resolve or your stoicism. And just in general, like, how do you feel that you handle feedback or criticism? As we know, the internet is an awful place, but at least in reality, in theaters, right, people, you hear some chatter or like some murmurs, or maybe like the moments that you were hoping hooked people actually hooked people. So like, how do you deal with that? Or do you just, I've made it, it's there, forget it, let's have fun with it?
Usually what'll happen is like leading up to it, I'll get very anxious, especially because I'm always really mainly to me, the movie is the movie. Like I've already made peace with the lines of dialogue I'd fix, or certain things I'd clarify better or shoot better, etc. But I think what for me was I'm trying to think of like the way to phrase this, and I also may have lost my train of thought. Feel free to edit that out. No,
We got a guy.
Nope.
we got a guy.
Keeping
Oh
it in
yeah.
there.
So leading up to it, I'm usually just more concerned about the technical part, like whether like, is anything going to go off sync, or is the picture like, or is there a special effect I left in there? Just technical things. So usually about 5 minutes into it, I'm usually like, okay, this works, this plays, I'm okay from there, and then you're just trying to soak up the rest of it. And the times when I've been in a theater and it's played and they've known I was there, it's generally been a very positive atmosphere, and like, because I don't think people aren't going to come up and be like, man, your movie sucks, why'd you do that? Like, people are a little more respectful than that. And in the screens I've gone to where they didn't know I was there, it's generally gone well. So no walkouts or anything like that. So I look at that as a win. That's positive.
Absolute fucking win. I'm
Excellent.
sorry, Aaron, I've been eating the airtime. You were going to say something before.
That's okay. I have a question, but more just along the lines of what we've been talking. But with you, there's a lot of quotes with different directors kind of complaining about the combo of films hitting theaters and hitting streaming services. How do you feel about that, and having a film on a streaming service later than its initial release? But I'm still curious. Like, if it's in reference to like any of the directors who were like complaining for like having that HBO deal, though, that's a wonderful problem I would love to have.
Yeah, right.
Like a theatrical run and a screening on the same day with for no stress. So I can't speak to exactly their experience on it. I think one of the trickiest things about a VOD release is that, just in general, is that because you're not seeing it in a room full of people and getting that instant feedback, especially if it's not a movie as well known, you kind of have to try and find your reactions from people. Some will just, will post it on Amazon or like maybe reviews will pop up on Rotten Tomatoes and whatnot, but it's really hard to like, or at times it can be kind of difficult to find those reactions, especially if it's not, if it's not as well known. So, but in like the feedback I've gotten is really good. And, there are the people who, give you like one sentence, is like, movie sucks, ended after 10 minutes, blah. But, those ones that I'm very zen. I'm comfortable with the movie I made. I try to be very zen about it in general. I know not everyone's going to like the movie. It's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. No movie's going to satisfy everyone.
I feel like that's like the healthiest way to approach it. It's a healthy way to approach it for sure.
Well,
Everybody's a critic.
There was one podcast actually, like just the other day, they reviewed the movie, and it was a really fun, kind of conversation, like that they were kind of having. And but like when they started going into like, and here are the negatives, I was like, okay, I'll skip ahead 30 seconds. Okay, then they mentioned like the name of a character in a specific scene. I'm like, oh, I know they're gonna say skip and skip, and then they go, okay, and final review. I'm like, okay, so there are some times where I still get those little nods, but I try to be very zen, but every once in a while, if they say a specific word, I know they're gonna say, I already know, I would have fixed that if I could, but go away. So
the fact that you
Totally.
could anticipate the negative feedback means you're still grounded, I guess, in reality. You're like, okay, well, either I've heard it before, I'm okay with it, or like I know what they're saying and I would do it differently or something like that. But the question I had was this like a brain baby that you just needed to get out, or was this like for lack of a better term, a coming out party? Like, here is what I want to put out there, and come to me if you as a resume,
your premiere.
Right. Yeah. It was basically a little bit of both. So the way that the movie actually kind of came about was around 2012, which was a long time ago. There was I was kind of like sort of down in the dumps. Like, I was working at like a 9-to-5 job that I wasn't really that inspired by, and I was doing film stuff, but it wasn't really taking off as much as I wanted. And what happened was I saw this link on as if from Destiny. I saw this link on Facebook about this one website that was doing a music video contest for Linkin Park, the band. Dope. And they said, and so they said, make a music video for this song, and if we like it, like the top 2 will get like a cash prize, and the top winner, it gets shown on a slot on MTV or something like that. And I was like, okay. The song, I can kind of go, I can take it or leave it. But I was listening to the song. I was like, you know what? I want to do something just really fun. And I grew up watching like James Cameron movies like Terminator, and a lot of Hollywood action movies. And I also got into a lot of indies and that kind of stuff as I got older. But like, action is probably my favorite genre. And I just got this idea of like, contract killer decides to leave the business, but his boss won't let him, so they kidnap his wife, and he goes on a roaring rampage of revenge. I basically adapted that into just like a little 4-minute video starring Gary, the guy who eventually played the same role in the movie, and a couple of the same actors showed up there too. And I pulled together a lot of favors and stuff, and it didn't win the contest, but it was actually like the most widely seen entry in it, and it got a lot of people's attention in the Bay Area. And as a domino effect, later on, I went into like full-time freelancing about 6 months later. But when I was trying to figure out if I was going to make a feature film or like in general or not, because I felt like I was kind of feeling like it was like the time, I started thinking like, well, I can't do a big budget version of this one. Like that's like that. I could only do that if I had like $20 million. But I was like, what if I did approach it this way or this way? And this started being planting of like what the less than $5 million version of the movie would be. And I was writing it around like locations I had access to, and basically just kind of forming the story. And just basically I wrote it, and I was determined to finish it. Once you start going and once you start getting a little momentum, you start going. And about a year and a half later, we were filming the movie.
I think I might have seen it only because, and that makes sense. Only because I know some of these actors. We were in acting class together. We've worked on stuff together. And Aaron, if you don't know, this film has got Bay Area royalty all up in it, man. Like every from Gary.
I'll say this:
Eric,
I thought they looked Bay Area.
to Liz, to Carl, to David Wahaken and Mr. Escalante. This is like if I could pick out all the best actors I know in the Bay Area and put them in a film, this would probably be the cast. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I was always.
Did you also casting director it?
Yeah. Like if credits were honest, like if I actually was like crediting myself or other people for all the jobs they did, my name would have a lot of different categories. But also me and Gary, we were like the main casting people, because I think he cast a lot of the people in smaller roles that and actually he found Eric Sundquist, who I didn't know at the time. I think he cast 8 roles of people who were like in his acting class at the time, or had been, or he had an association with. He found a lot of the extras, and dude's a Renaissance man. I would put him up with anything.
He chose the right people.
Wow, Gary, vote of confidence,
because Warren.
No, but that's interesting how that like all came together.
And also the funny thing with the Bay Area is that like I tried to like get like the best cast in the Bay Area, but also one of the things I was always very conscious of is that when making a movie like this, I want to basically make it be comprised of actors that would not look out of place in like a Martin Scorsese movie, or like a big crime epic where like they have a few more battle scars, they got a little more city miles, and like a roughness and intensity to them. And I think it's a lot in the Bay Area, a lot of actors, that kind of vibe. And a lot of the actors in the Bay Area, they keep it very like industrial, very clean cut, because that's where the work is in the Bay Area. It's industrials and corporate. That was a tricky part. Thanks to Gary and his connections and other people I kind of encountered through life, we got what I consider to be one of the best casts that you can get from the Bay Area.
Yeah, just to kind of toss some bouquets, like watching Eric do scenes in acting class was just like everyone kind of stopped what they're doing because you knew he was going to bring the stakes to the table. And, you know, Carl was hysterical. David Hawkins is a serious guy. And yeah, I'm sorry, I can go on and on about this cast, but it's interesting to view the film from the perspective of actually knowing them, but feeling good with the execution of the film to where it wasn't a distraction, right? So it was, I could actually still immerse myself and not see, you know, Gary beat somebody up, but you know, Joel.
Well, I think one thing I kind of applied this to the entire production, which was I want to make it so that it is shot in the Bay Area, but I was purposely trying not to identify it as like a specific city. Like, so there's no like longing shots of the Golden Gate Bridge. There's no, you know, or like the different towers in San Francisco or anything like that. Like I could easily just wrote in the words like Detroit or LA, and people would probably be like, oh, okay, I guess it's there. Like, because I've seen Bay Area movies where sometimes they're kind of mugging for like they'll mention very specific streets, like and this place in Oakland. I'm like, yeah, we know that. What's the point of like you're trying to get like a hometown pop, and so what like in like locations wise, but also like, you know, I wasn't trying to like make anything very overtly Bay Area. It's just that just happened to be where we shoot. So it's a small point. This is one of my own like little weird fixations. Yeah, I was trying not to do anything that was very like explicit or like remind you that you're in the Bay Area. Like I want to feel like it could be in any sort of mid-sized metropolis.
I did get that vibe from a lot of the scenes.
I got that vibe too.
Awesome.
Yeah, because some of the sets didn't really define an area, which is good because it kind of feels like anyone can really grasp onto this from wherever they're from, you know, not just like a Bay Area crowd getting like, yeah, Oakland, or something like that.
Also, except for one little thing I had a problem with, you could put this in any time period, right? There weren't really too many overt tells that said that this was 2020, 2005, you know, whatever. Like this, you could watch this and genuinely in your mind. I think that helps with me, at least the immersion factor of things being believable, right? I'm not like putting a timestamp on something when I initially see it.
It was intentional, but also in some cases it was also kind of like unintentional, or it wasn't anything that was like we were like super thinking of. But like in the first scene of the movie, there's a like an old like 70s like reel-to-reel tape recorder that we hear like a little bit of an excerpt from like a flash forward type thing. That's not often used in like police interrogations, but it just felt like aesthetically it was like, oh, that actually looks pretty cool, and also it kind of fits the vibe of it. But like in the movie, tone, it even goes down to like small things, like especially the big thing was, you know, that I think can ruin film at times is a cell phone. And like, you know, when we're making this movie, I think it was like the iPhone 4 or 5 was like the big thing, and now it's like you show that and it's like, oh, this movie takes place in 2012, I guess. It's like, no, that's just what we had. So like everyone uses like burner phones and flip phones.
So
like
why use the CD as the MacGuffin? Why use the CD?
That was your one issue.
That was my issue.
I feel like that's what we were using at the time. It was either that or like a flash drive. And I think if I was rewriting it now, I'd probably make it a flash drive just because it's a little less intrusive. Yeah, I don't know why it was. I mean, and anytime I ever think about anything I would change,
can you make it a floppy disk?
A floppy disk. Yeah.
To be fair, Mr. Robot also uses CDs, and like it drives me up a fucking wall. Like, so just to be fair.
Okay, I don't know enough about hacking for that to bother me. That's a quick tangent. We run the tangent train quite often here. I was going to say though, I do like the approach because sometimes you have to do something cinematically in order to like make it a little more visually appealing. You know, so I did like the fact that the tape recorder was going off in the beginning, even though I didn't literally until just now I didn't realize. Police wouldn't use that.
Just to give you a frame of reference.
I'm aware of what it is. I had a dial
phone of our argument.
Here. I'm a millennial. We're in the same range. We're just at the end of the range.
Don't
We're
pull
both
me
at
into your dirty bath.
I'm going to Google this.
We are not.
I'm Googling this.
Mommy,
we had a guest here, Aaron.
You're tearing this family apart. Sorry. Because like it wouldn't have had the same, I don't know, something about the tape recorder specifically wouldn't hit as hard if it was like an iPhone and the audio file was just playing off of it. You know what I mean? Like it's just an iPhone in a room. Yeah. So I do like that approach. I think that was good.
Well, thank you. There's a saying, I think it was by Stanley Kubrick or someone older, where it was like, between fact and legend, print the legend. And I was like, yeah, like, and I think there's things, and I think there's things like that where it's like, yeah, realistically, they'd probably just be using like a little iPhone, like, you know, memo recorder, but that's not interesting to watch at all. And, you know, so sometimes it's sometimes leaning into audience expectations about like, you know, like prop design or even like how certain places look. Like, like if you want to show like an apartment that's very like minimalist, like they haven't unpacked, like it's just a very kind of empty space, or it's meant to be a small apartment, you still have to like choose a really big one, and then the camera can make it look small. Otherwise, it looks weird if it's actually small, or it doesn't look right. So so there are things you have to kind of that you have to adjust for audience expectations, and it can work because sometimes just real life is just really boring.
Yeah, and it like becomes really monotonous and tedious to sort of like set design on a lot of those things becomes its own fucking heavy lift to my limited knowledge. But as an aside, Ferguson, who is another Bay Area Knight, how do you do, sir? Was your cinematographer?
He also was the DP on the original Linkin Park music video that we did, and so he had first dibs when it came to the project. But we were very eye to eye. Yeah, he shot the hell out of the movie, and I think even though it was shot several years ago, like we watched it kind of recently, or like especially seeing on the big screen, he's like, yeah, I stand by all my decisions, and I'm sure there's things maybe he might change now, or if we had a bigger budget, there's things he might do. But he's like the approach we took to the movie in terms of like how we're framing certain stuff and what the overall scheme of it, like we still stand by how it looks. So yeah, he's a blast. We're like basically best friends in real life. So through thick and thin, we've gotten through it.
Yeah, and he's got a great eye, and I 100% support the vision that he put out, because it was absolutely an asset to the film. But one thing I did want to ask Aaron before I get into this is, he put himself in the film. You did not. Why don't you appear in your own work? And what do you think of directors who do that?
So technically, I do show up. Technically, I do show up once. My hand shows up. It doubles for Gary's hand in a glove once, because I needed an insert shot. We didn't quite have it. So technically, I do. I think I'm just too antsy if I'm not behind the camera seeing exactly what it's gonna look like. I'm sure if it's just me walking in the background, I'm sure it'll probably be fine, but I'm still always just very paranoid about like, oh, how's the frame look? How are the actors? Because if I'm walking across that frame, I'm putting all my attention into walking across that frame. So I'm always worried about missing something. While I wish I was a little more okay about doing that and would have a more prominent cameo, it's probably for the best, because I realized a long time ago being behind the camera it's a benefit to humanity more so than me being in front.
Taking shots at don't worry, we won't tell Tarantino what you just said. It's okay.
Oh,
M. Night's been on front of a camera. You're fine.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I'm sure maybe at some point maybe I'll do it, but I get antsy. So until then, I'll let others have the glory in that case. Aaron, I think you had a question before Warren did. Yeah. Go ahead.
You did bring up the budget briefly, and I was curious if you're comfortable with revealing that. I am curious what the budget for it was. Two-part question, and then what were the type of cameras you were using? Because you were right. It really does still feel fine. It feels the quality of the film. It feels fine for 2021.
Thank you. I won't say what the exact one is. I will give a hint, which is that the budget was less than $5 million. But that was basically it was an amount that like there's a riddle that I would say. It's basically that it was you probably cut this part out. No, but it wasn't exactly the amount that you'd want, but it was just enough to get us to the finish line. And especially if you ever see it on a big screen, like there really is a difference between seeing on your TV and then seeing it on a 30-foot screen. Some movies don't really have that as much, but this one it really does feel like it definitely feels like it's punching above its weight when you see it like projected. Especially with locations we got and just like the roller coaster ride that I try to kind of pace it out as. Like it really does have a different feeling on the big screen.
Dude, no, you can absolutely tell that this film was handled with TLC, and I think it's kind of contributed to the amount of time you put into it. So at 100%, I can absolutely see getting a different take on the film watching it from a movie theater versus watching it where I watched it in my home. 100%.
You said you noticed things you would have changed, and I'm curious to ask about what those are in a moment. But we're probably just doing the movie. But I'm curious what. Here. Yeah, we're done. That's out the window. I just really curious your opinion and the process of it. But yeah, what was the question? Is the answer?
Oh yeah, basically what I would change if I could. I mean,
There you go. Yeah.
like there, like every, like there's a couple parts where maybe I would change the edits around a little bit, or maybe change the flow of it like a tiny bit. But I mean, most of it really kind of goes back more towards the writing, and then because basically that's like the hardest thing to change. And most times you're sort of stuck where you are to a certain extent because based on how it was shot. There's like lines of dialogue I probably wish I would have either changed around, or there's ways to simplify it. Or also when we were shooting the movie, there was a lot of, I gave the actors a pretty good leeway in terms of being able to improv, as long as you keep the main basics of the line. But if there's ways that they were able to make things a little smoother, I gave them a lot of freedom there. But some of the actors improv a lot more F-bombs in it, and I wish that I would have held a tighter rein on that. That's not a big deal. But there are certain things where when I listened to a podcast the other day where they were going into some of their negatives, there were certain points where they were in this scene they say that such and such happens, but in the previous scene there was an inconsistency. I'm like, damn it. Things I didn't realize till just then. So nothing that would require extra scenes to be shot, just things that it's if I only thought about that in the writing stage back in 2013, then maybe that is. But for a script I wrote in 2013, I still actually feel pretty good about it. And there's some logistical stuff during the shoot that I wish I could have changed a little bit, but a lot of it, especially on indie films, that you only have so much control over destiny. So a lot of it, most of it's just adapting.
Well, other than the podcast bringing up some points, where did you first see it? You saw it in theaters when you first saw it, other than the editing process?
Yeah, other than the editing bay. So the first time I saw it on a big screen was 2018.
So is that where you also personally just noticed a few things, or was it much later on? I'm just curious.
Just kind of over time. Seeing it on a big screen didn't really change my overall perception of the movie. And I also knew that once it was locked for the big screen, I wasn't really going to have the bandwidth to really change anything. By that point, I had a pretty good sense of how it would play, and anything that I'd want to change, it wouldn't be worth opening the movie back up and doing it. So yeah, I made my peace with it back in 2018. There's some parts where it's maybe this scene has too many cuts, or maybe not enough cuts, and that kind of thing. That was stuff I was already kind of mainly conscious of when I was editing it, or when it was already locked and I was in sound design and color and stuff. But there wasn't any big revelations on there, aside at least any of things I would change. To me, the big thing was really seeing it on the big screen was oh wow, this location looks much bigger than it looked on that laptop screen. I think also the feeling of the roller coaster played even more, where I was okay, this actually does have the intended feel, because the intent was to kind of make it feel after about the first act, when everyone sort of disperses from the kidnapping, then it's no one really knows what's going on. Everyone's in different places. Some people have only bits and pieces of information, and everyone's double crossing each other, and so it becomes a rat race between who's going to end up winning. So I wanted to make that as sort of frantic as possible. I think that definitely played on the big screen. That's where I made my piece, where I felt really proud.
Yeah, the film definitely definitely felt dense, but still the pacing felt right, because there weren't really very many lulls in the action or in the dialogue even. And then it kind of hits at this crescendo towards the end that tapers off without giving spoilers away.
Sure.
You used, I have a pet peeve with film where, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I've been doing it this whole time. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Got it. I have a pet peeve with some films when they use shaky cam the wrong way, when it's not a tense scene, at all. It hasn't become one yet and it's still a little shaky. It's am I watching The Office or something? And I wanted to say, you didn't do that. My pet peeve didn't trigger at all. And I was super happy about that. It was awesome.
Hey, well, that was something that my DP was he had a really big bone to pick with. You and him would have a lot in common when it comes to shaky cam. Yeah. So we basically, the intent we had with in terms of basically how Act 1 was shot, how Act 2 was shot, and that kind of thing was, for the most part during that first act, we kind of wanted to keep it very sort of static, or dollies and that kind of stuff. Not a whole lot of shaky cam stuff. We're just kind of seeing the world sort of presented, and then after the kidnapping at the end of Act 1, then it becomes a lot more of a documentary feel. You're always seeing stuff only eye level or below. It's a little shaky following you from one part to the other, but I didn't want anyone having a seizure or getting really motion sick, watching the movie. So it was definitely a thing that we were very conscious of. And there are specific movies my DP would designate as all right, whatever they did in that, we're not doing that. So it was definitely a process getting the vibe right. But I knew we were going mainly handheld through the last 2/3. But it was when I saw the first cut of the movie, I was okay, this actually worked. I was I know we're doing it, but it really hit me when I was watching all in sequence. It's oh yeah, this really does kind of feel like a documentary at times. Just a really frantic one, and I think it just makes it more immersive. It makes you feel like you're more there. I think it's a really easy trap to fall into, where if it moves a little too much, then it's like, okay, stop. Like I'm not into this at all. So it's a tricky balance. But my DP worked wonders, and Tyler Manzo, my camera operator.
Well, the film hooks you very, very quickly. I'd say like the first 10 minutes, you're like, yep, okay, I'm settled in with the violence, but also just kind of like, what the fuck is going on here? What sold me appreciated your level of violence. Aaron, goddamn it, we're gonna have a talk about this.
Aaron was complimenting me. Let him talk.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I'll just say what sold me. I'll make it quick, bro. Come on. What sold me was, I love the tape recorder at the beginning, but what sold me into it was when Eric punched the people they were like torturing in the very beginning, and the blood splatters on Joel's face, and he's just like, "Oh, what the fuck!" Like, something. I was like, "Okay, all right, I'm here. I'm done. I'm here."
Thank you for bringing that up, because that was one of my favorite gags. Like when I thought of it in the writing, I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be fun." And it took a little bit of time, I think, to kind of convey like the exact blocking of it and like the exact camera movement. And because you only get like 1 or 2 takes for it, so there was a lot of like practice without doing the spit and that kind of stuff. So thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. Sorry, continue singing my praises.
No, for sure. What I was going to say before I was so rudely interrupted was that I did appreciate the violence in the film, as well as how isolated it was. You didn't really need to be like that crazy with it, but it seemed realistic in the consequences, right? Like blood splatter between these two trained hitmen. It's kind of like unprofessional. Like the first 10 minutes did a great job of portraying what kind of psycho Eric was, when Gary just kind of like, yeah, this isn't the Joel was like, yeah, like they're dead. Stop fucking beating a piece of meat. And also the subsequent fights. One thing I hate with action films is that like people survive, a punch to the throat. Like it goes way too far back and forth, where it's like, no, you just got hit in the arm with a bat, right? You're down, right? Like, and the film had that, and I appreciated that. I definitely did.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, like the fight scenes themselves, those were like the biggest thing that I think people were like going like, "Oh, you're gonna try to make an action movie, and you got some fight scenes. That's a lot of fight scenes. Yeah, we believe you're totally gonna pull that off." So I knew that was going to be one of the biggest tricks. And so, I mean, to me, one of the biggest things was that I really wanted to make sure that it felt kind of as grounded as possible. Because also, like, the actors did all their own stunts.
Good word.
So there's only going to be so much you can really get away with. But I always kind of looked at it as, like, I was like, all right, the default fighting style is not, like, Matrix-y, kung fu or anything like that, or martial arts.
It's messy. Like that. This was messy, and I loved it.
It's a brawl. Like I want to convey the sense like a fight could easily go the distance, or it could also easily end in like 5 seconds with a headlock. And or like a pet peeve, for instance, for me is like, if someone gets hit with a beer bottle, like beer bottles are pretty thick. Like it's not going to break, right away on a first hit. So like there's a beer bottle gag later on in the movie where like the first hit hits someone, and then Joel like turns around and hits someone else, and then it breaks. Like it's been softened up a little bit. So I want to convey that kind of vibe, because basically everything had its own weight to it. And like this movie came out well after the point I finished it, but like The Irishman, the Martin Scorsese movie, I think, and also the TV show The Wire. The way they conveyed violence is something I really respect, where it's like, it's not flashy, it's not like, glamorized or anything. It's just like, this is what it is. Like a gunshot, it's just like, oh, a guy gets shot kind of awkwardly. They kind of react a little awkwardly, and they just kind of fall. In this one, we kind of spruced it up a little bit, but it's just like, okay, it's not glamorous, and it's not, there's not a whole lot of blood in the walls. It's just like, oh, okay, a guy got shot very badly, or a person got their head bashed in pretty badly. So it's just, it is what it is. I also want to make sure that if anyone was going to walk out of the movie, I'd rather they do in the first 5 minutes. So like the tone is right there at the beginning of the movie. So lest there be no confusion.
So if that was the goal, to set the tone on the type of violence you would potentially be seeing, with the contrast of Eric and Joel, like mission accomplished.
I also just want to say
the fights struggling in the house were like great too.
I also just want to convey to anyone listening, the movie is not a total like action fest throughout the whole entire thing. Like there is a love story, there's some comedy and stuff. Like it's not just nothing but gunfights and that kind of stuff. Like there is a heart to it. And I like to think there's something for everyone. There probably isn't, but I like to think that way anyways.
I was surprised there was an affair, I'll say, no spoilers, but like in it at some point between
I'm gonna give a
two
spoiler.
characters that I was like,
no. This is your action movie. There's no sex scene. Where's your sex scene? You need a sex scene. You got the sexiest
In the
people in the
words-
Bay Area walking around in here. There's no sex scenes.
In the words of It's Always Sunny, full penetration.
Did you debate that? Did you have that in, take it out, or is it just like not? It's not. It didn't. We weren't going to shoehorn this in.
Yeah,
I think you can make actors do that. But
I mean, even in the best of circumstances, like sex scenes are always kind of like a really tricky thing to fit in. Like, there was never any draft where it was like where it was ever really considered. Because also, like, I feel like most sex scenes in movies, like, it's either there because the distributor wanted it, or it was there because the director had a fetish. Like, there's very few times I felt like where it's ever really justified. Also, I think that there's so much going on in the movie that, like, to like stop. We're gonna watch this for 2 minutes as character A is dry humping our unfortunate actress. It's like, there just wasn't really much of a place for it in the movie. I wanted to at least be able to give the sense of a relationship without like a total detour.
The closest thing we get to sex is seeing
respect it.
Carl Schreiber in a towel. I'm disappointed, my man.
Well, like I said, I try to show something for everyone. So the ladies get him in the buff, almost in the buff anyways. We had the joke on Warpath that like there was actually a lot of like attractive looking men in the movie. So we were like thinking, like what if we just do the Warpath calendar? Like of just nothing but the men. And that'll make our budget back, whenever released. So 2021, everyone just does a photo spread. It'd be great. It's
I gotta see
very
the Eric month. I gotta see the Eric month where he's just kicking someone's ass or something while being attractive.
Exactly. But I'll leave that to the photographer ideas to make the most of it.
All right. So kind of chewed your ear off with questions, and you get to see the Discord that me and Aaron operate in. But we also like to understand a little bit about our guests and, just kind of get an idea of, what are you watching right now? Like what is on your Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, Disney Plus? What's enthralling you? What's got your attention?
I think lately I haven't really been watching as much TV because I just haven't had enough time to really like, and also I think it's also just kind of like maybe like an instinctual like fight against the culture right now, which is like every week there's like 3 new shows you just have to see.
Yeah.
The first 2 seasons suck, but then the 3rd season's really good. And like just going on and on. I don't have time to be in the zeitgeist. So like I've been rewatching a lot of shows. They're like limited series. So like I saw Mare of Easttown recently, and I love that show. I was rewatching Watchmen on HBO, and I was like, that's a great one too. Mainly what I've been watching lately is actually just sort of like the rabbit hole of like different YouTube channels, like about different subjects. Like I actually love to just learn about like astronomy or like geography. Just I probably sound like the most boring person out there, but what I'm actually watching it kind of varies. But there's I'm trying to think of like any other shows or movies that I've been watching. I saw The Green Knight recently in theaters, and that was okay. I'm sure I'll remember all like the other recent stuff like 5 minutes after the podcast ends. Yeah, so I've mainly been watching a lot of like limited series and like short content like on YouTube and stuff, rather than getting into like any big new shows and whatnot.
Sorry, I was buffering. I think Aaron was buffering a little bit too. What show did you just say? I can see. I got it all. It's recorded. Don't worry. I just missed it. Warren missed it.
Sure.
As much as you were talking about not being someone who watches film, I finally, just as you open up about what you're interested in, my connection drops.
Oh, gotcha. I do watch a lot of film and stuff. It's just my brain's not giving me the general gist of what I've been watching. So TV wise, it's been a lot of limited series like Mare of Easttown, which I really liked. I rewatched Watchmen and Chernobyl recently. I get a lot of mileage out of my HBO Max account.
Yep, HBO Max is killing the game.
Yeah. It like the UI, I'm not the biggest fan of, but the movies and the shows and stuff like that, it's like there's a lot of stuff on Netflix that I like, but there's also I think the sense of from a lot of it where it feels like there's a lot of stuff that's very much like a rough draft that they just put into production where it's not quite they haven't quite gotten all their ducks in a row to making like a compelling movie or shows in some cases. But there's a lot of my queue that have been on there for years that I'll probably never get around to, and other things I'm continually building up a queue, but I'm only watching like a few things a month.
My what welcome to watch next. Yeah, hey, welcome back, man. My what to watch next list is like slowly outnumbering the films that I've seen. Because it's just like you're right, it's like an oversaturation. It's a good problem to have, but to that same effect, is there anything coming out that you'd like? I'm really interested in the Casino Royale trailer. I haven't seen Shang-Chi yet, but I want to go check it out. Unfortunately, it's theater release only, and like the Halle Berry, Patrick Wilson Moonfall trailer looks pretty good, pretty interesting. But again, I'm not like, you know what I'd probably see before those? I'd probably see the Elijah Wood, the No Man of God movie where he is an FBI agent interrogating Ted Bundy, because that's coming to Netflix versus these theatrical releases. But there's definitely a lot that I'd want to check out.
Well, like to me, the big one that I'm really excited for, like the one I will brave a movie theater for, is Dune. I'm really excited for that one, and also, I mean, we are literally recording this on the day that the next Matrix movie had its own trailer premiere.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you didn't talk about that during the buffering part. Okay, I'm very curious. Okay,
so many thoughts. But
what do you think about that?
I'll say this, that I have not said in almost 20 years. I'm really excited for the next Matrix movie. I probably haven't said that. I haven't said that since probably after I watched Reloaded at that time. Yep. But I think it kind of made me appreciate the series more. Like, there's things about Reloaded I really like. I didn't really care for Revolutions that much, but I think, like, you know, like there's been enough distance. It looks like they're going through some interesting stories and that kind of stuff, and it just looks spectacular. And I think it's also one of those franchises that has not been like rebooted already, hasn't had TV spinoffs. Like the last big Matrix thing that they had was like a couple of video games like years ago that I never played. So
one of the greatest video games. You played Matrix Online? That game was so fucking good.
Oh
I never played that one, but I have a big soft spot for the Matrix Path of Neo, where you played as Neo. It was for like the PlayStation 2. I would play that game in a hot second if I had access to it. But yeah, I think it's because there's been less re-exposure to it. Like, I like Spider-Man. I don't think I need to see 3 Spider-Man, franchises in my lifetime, but I'll see that. But I don't get as excited about it. But this one actually looks fresh. It's coming from the original people. It looks like they have something to say with it. I'm like, all right. And the trailer looked amazing. So I'm very excited for that. And Dune, I was not a big fan of the David Lynch movie that was made, and David Lynch is not a big fan of the David Lynch movie that he made. But like that one has like all the elements that would just make me just like go like sign right up for it. So I feel pretty safe at a movie theater generally. So I've seen a lot of movies since they've started to open back up. But
there's a generation of kids who don't know what the Matrix is.
Don't
Aaron's
you look at
generation,
me.
right?
Don't you dare look at me. That's BS. I knew what it was. I grew up with it.
Took me an hour to explain to him what the Matrix was the other day.
How
so
dare
don't worry
you?
About it.
But you're talking Animatrix? Have you seen the Animatrix? I have.
I love it.
Damn it.
You talk about braving a movie theater, right? And I think this is kind of how you wound up on this podcast, because we had a slight disagreement online where I was mentioning that, like, I watch a lot of movies in VR, and not, if you haven't, I'm a huge advocate for it. It's a great consumption experience, but like, I don't see the need to go to a theater anymore. Me as like a hyper consumer of of films. I think you're in the camp of like, there are certain intentions behind creating it to be consumed in this medium versus this medium or this medium. I see what you're saying, but I think the shift, the Pandora's box is open. I can watch it at my leisure. I can consume, I can kick back, have a pizza or whatever. And I think that movie theaters are going to become like these like little boutique shops and like nice throwback experiences, as opposed to like what we've been used to them being. And you disagree?
Yeah. So, because I mean, okay, I'm a little biased because when I made Warpath, I was always trying to like make it be a movie that like, okay, like it'll still play well on VOD, but like, if I can get a theatrical release, like it's going to make it feel like it belongs on screen. As I mentioned before, there definitely was a really different feel you have. Like, it feels like a much bigger movie when you see it on like a physically bigger screen. And I think the drama comes out a little bit more. The action feels like it hits just a little better, especially with a good sound system. And so like, that's for me in my own movie. But like, say for instance, Mad Max Fury Road, I think that was one of the examples I brought up. Like, I love the movie in theaters, and I still love the movie, but like, it feels like instead of being in fourth gear, it feels like it's like 1, maybe 2, like when I'm just watching it on my TV, especially comedies. Some of the best experiences I've ever had watching comedies were like Austin Powers 2 or like The Hangover, where like everyone's into the movie, everyone's there opening night, and like the laughs feels like 10 times funnier, and every moment just has a different feel. I don't get that nearly as much when I'm just watching like alone or like with one other person or whatever. Like, I think there is a communal experience that I think still makes the movies worth going to. It may be chipped away at, in subsequent years and that kind of stuff. And also, I don't want to, encourage anyone to go to the theaters if like, especially they have a big health concern or.
There we go.
Yeah. Like I'm not going to be like, I'm not, because the whole controversy started because Denis Villeneuve was talking about Dune, and he's like, you should see it in theaters if you can.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I get it. I encourage it. I encourage if you feel like you can do it safely.
He stopped just shy of pushing people to the theaters, and I thought that was irresponsible.
I get how people can kind of see it that way, but I think it's also one of those things that, like, I think Twitter can also sometimes make things seem worse than what it is, like a comment and that kind of thing. I think he was just being very wistful. Like, I really wish everyone would be able to get a chance to see it in theaters. That's what was intended. And, but I mean, you can still see it on HBO and it's fine. I just really wish people be able to see it. I think people were like, he's encouraging people to get sick and see the movie. I'm like, he's not doing that. He's going with it because there's no other option. But if you can see it safely, do it. And I'm going to go see it in IMAX. I'm very floaty. I'll go around and, like, I'll wear my mask and, I do things as safe as possible, but I just kind of float, and I don't fear going to the theaters. I don't go to the gym in life, but
it's okay. We all float down here.
Okay.
We all float down
We're
here.
floaty. We're a floaty group. I would argue those are two different discussions, honestly, because that's why I kind of asked about the streaming platform. Like, some movies are supposed to be seen in theaters, and some movies can be seen at home in the comfort, and you'll still get the emotional weight and the visual spectacle of it. But at the same time, I'm not a watching VR kind of guy. I'm a let's go to the movies. I grew up going to the movies for the experience, and I can tell.
You're nostalgic.
Like a lot of them, not alone. There's some movies that are actually made. Like, if it hits differently in a theater than it does on a TV screen. Maybe not in VR. I haven't tried that, but VR gets me nauseous after a while. Like, I'm not a VR guy.
No, I'm not saying, 100%, right? Like, when I was growing up, internet cafes became a thing because, like, you wanted to play Counter-Strike, but you didn't really have the high-speed network at your house, right? Movie theater is kind of the same way. You go to the theater because you don't have, the big IMAX home thing at your house, but now home theaters are like great personalized experience, and I'm seeing the slow tapering off of the importance of movie theaters, and like, we shouldn't value a film based on how many seats are in the chairs on opening night, because me personally, not projecting on anybody, I really hate that experience. When Dennis put out that tweet, it was also on the back of like Scarlett Jo's fight with Disney. Right. And everyone's like, that's irresponsible. Like, we know you got a contract, but like, well, what the hell? Like,
I think another thing about theaters that I like is that there's less distractions, because, like, I can literally be watching.
Hard disagree.
Okay. It depends on the theater.
It depends on the theater.
Depends on the movie.
Is, like, what I'm referring to is that basically, like, I'll always see tweets from people being like, well, I'm just going to watch it on my TV because I don't want to deal with teenagers texting in movies and people talking. And, like, I'm sure that goes on, My experience has generally been pretty good. Like, there have been some annoying people I've had in theaters, but I guess I just choose the right theaters, or I choose the right time of day to go. Or it's like, oh, it's a momentary bug me, but like, if I'm at home, like, there's a TV right in front of where I am right now. I could be watching TV, but then it's like, oh, I just feel like being on my cell phone. Oh, someone's going to call. I need to go use the bathroom. I'm going to go get the mail. Like, or like, someone's bugging me. I saw stop, and like, we're like a 2-hour movie. You can feel like it takes 5 hours to do. And I don't like that. I want it as much as possible. I want to be immersed in what was intended. I also I like my TV and stuff like that. Doesn't compare to a big screen. So if you're able to do it, and enjoy it, I encourage it. If it's not your thing, I have no problem with that. I do have a thing about streaming I'll mention, but it sounds like you want to interject.
No, I just was saying this is a man who's never had to take a piss during the middle of a movie, and isn't thankful for the pause feature Home Life enables in order to make that one's
happen. Fine. I have no problem with that portion. But in terms of the things people always bring up, like, annoying teenagers. I'm like, yeah, but you might just easily live with a really annoying teenager, and they're going to be just as annoying, in there. So
if we're going to like an independent film in theaters, what high schoolers are going to that independent film to make fun of said film? Plus, the Bay Area is a good area to see things in the theaters. Yeah. My brother lives in Utah, and he says there's like always someone eating like a giant burger at every movie he's ever been in, and he can't do it anymore. So
that's why I said it's the movie too, right? Like, less kids are going to be lining up to see some heart to heart independent, epiphany film versus Iron Man 9, right? Like, two different experiences. So I completely empathize with that.
There was one thing Aaron mentioned about like the whole thing about streamers and how certain movies are, can be kind of made for it and whatnot. And I think the one thing about streamers, at least if you get up to a certain level of like fame where like you can like in my case, like, if it's to like direct a movie that is going straight to streaming, I think there's something really good about that in the sense of like, yeah, they're going to try to get more subscribers, but like a lot of it's just feeding the beast. And I think there's issues there in terms of like movies that don't get nearly enough attention, but like that, like say with Netflix, like there was a movie that came out a couple months ago called Gunpowder Milkshake. And it was the talk of Twitter for one day, and then they never mentioned it again, and because they have the next one that has to go in there. So I think there's issues there with the marketing and like letting people know that this like movie they spent millions of dollars on exists. But I think there's something kind of cool about like if you get to a certain level where it's like you're not expected to make like a $50 million opening weekend, where it's like, okay, like they're making this knowing it's going to be like there's where it's going. So there's not that opening weekend pressure, because when there's that pressure, then that you travel back to like the beginning of the script and like the beginning of that process. There's so many things that they do to like maximize that opening weekend that can make things kind of that aren't always to the benefit of the movie.
A lot of money is spent on the opening weekend, and the opening weekend sales has a cap to it just based on the capacity and the hard count in the theaters, where I would argue a server in your living room does not, right? Like, everyone in the world who wants to see this at 8 p.m. can see this at 8 p.m. whenever they want to. They don't have to fight traffic, find an aisle seat or a front row seat because they showed up late, or like do that whole fucking dance. Worry about getting shot. I'm being funny. But in the COVID era, right? Like, I want to ask you, Casey, directly, like, are film festivals even necessary anymore, right? We Are One, Tribeca released online completely as a result of COVID, was massively successful, and others are following suit. But, they're for filmmakers in the network and the shaking hands and in the after parties, that's kind of where you build those professional relationships. And I don't, your professional opinion, can you find just as much success with an online release or networking through social media, or do you still think film festivals have some level of importance where they're never going to go away? Not never going to go away, but become less emphasized.
Well, having gone through the circuit a bunch of times with mostly shorts and then this feature and stuff, and another one of a short that I did that I've started to submit for and whatnot. It really depends. And I think part of it kind of dovetails with what we talked about earlier with my own experience with Warpath. So every movie is going to be different. Some movies are just not made for festivals, and so you're just wasting your money going through it. Whereas like some of them absolutely need it, and they're not going to get anywhere unless they get like those extra laurels, those extra festivals, that kind of stuff. Like I mentioned earlier, one of my big things was like I want to see how it played within a theater with people. And I think that's where I think that festivals are really good, because I don't submit to a festival unless there actually is a physical event going on. Now, I can't say that there's been a whole lot of people that like got me jobs that were people that I met through festivals. I've gotten more attention if it's like, oh, I submitted a movie through a festival and I got a bunch of awards, and then certain people start to take you more seriously. I think it's largely kind of the case now, where I think there's largely about maybe 12 to 15 festivals that matter, that can help you get into those meetings, or they have like the guy who's related to the guy who's related to the guy who's related to the guy who is looking for a director of just your type who attends the festival and stuff. So there's probably about 12 to 15 of those that matter, and it encompasses the entire world.
Those 12 to 15 will never go away.
Yeah, those will never go away. They will always have a purpose. It's just the issue becomes what gets into those festivals. Like in Sundance, I know there's certain years where almost every like official selection like of a feature that's not a documentary, almost all of them already had distribution deals in place. So it was all marketing for them. It wasn't like, oh, like this scrappy little indie movie that got into Sundance and then, caused a bidding war. Like that doesn't really happen as much. So I think there's certain things like that like, so that Sundance, like, dream story doesn't happen as much, but those things still do happen at times. And so like those will never go away. Like if you're only doing like one, like festivals in the Midwest, like they're probably not going to get you like the really cool meetings, but it can help you build an audience.
How much
continue that's the trick.
How much of the modern indie festival is kind of like a payola for marketing, in that it's less of a scrappy creative individual that might have 2 or 3 on the bill the entire festival, but like my hunch is that most of those 12 to 15s are now like getting laurels and legitimizing films that will eventually go into the box office. Basically films that don't need to be in the festival. What's your perspective on that happening?
I remember there was a controversy a couple years ago when that movie Jupiter Ascending from the Wachowskis.
Oh my.
Where, yeah.
Oh my god.
I've never seen the movie, but I know it was not exactly the most, critically or audience loved movie out there. But they did a surprise screening at Sundance of Jupiter Ascending, and people were pissed off. And so it's like that took a slot from a movie that maybe could have used it, or maybe a movie that would get a second screening. So there are certain movies there that that maybe don't need it. There are a lot of movies there definitely benefit from it, but they're usually ones that are already going to have some kind of platform. It's just how aware are people going to be? So I've submitted for Sundance before, didn't get in, but those top three, I think it's Sundance, I think Toronto is one, and maybe Cannes, in the main slots. Those are going to be out of reach for 99% of filmmakers. But those next couple, 5 to 8, I think are always ones that there's always that shot that can happen every year. And so those I think are the ones that I always kind of target for the most part.
So but, not entirely corrupt.
Well, I won't name names, but but there are ones where occasionally there are ones that break through and get some attention and whatnot. One of my dreams was to have Warpath play at the South by Southwest Film Festival, because I thought that would actually be one of the best venues for it, and it didn't get in. But it's still my dream to get something that plays there. And also, every movie is different. Certain movies are just not going to really make sense. Also, same thing is not every movie needs a theatrical experience. The Kissing Booth #2 probably plays just as well on Netflix on your TV, and that there's nothing wrong with that. It knows what it is, and it knows where it's going to be watched, and that's fine.
I mean, I go to film looking for high art, so Kissing Booth ain't even on my radar. But I'm so happy you mentioned that.
I love the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League, and it's that movie would not exist without HBO Max. But I'm watching that, I'm man, I really just wish they'd have some kind of IMAX release, because that's also one we're watching it on my big screen TV doesn't work because they shot it in 4:3, and I'm this is made for IMAX, and so that 100 that's a whole other kettle of worms.
100%. The format doesn't fit. No. Now I get it. Here, you watch your tongue, because what Snyder Cut did was let people know that we have an appetite for 4 hours plus. Where movie theaters, that eats into their body. You're not gonna. When's the last time you see Grindhouse? Right? When's the last time you saw? And that was 2 movies. Right?
Although I did see The Irishman twice in theaters, and that's 3.5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
3.5 hours.
It's that long.
So people have the appetite for that, but we tend to do the Twitter thing where we're just now everything is kind of getting condensed and short because of the people who buy movie theater tickets, Aaron, Gen Z.
Oh, shut up.
That's what it is.
I don't buy their popcorn, if that helps.
You know what? How about we rectify this problem? We're moving into it as quickly as we can. Let's make a movie. And I got the perfect film that we're gonna make. The question is, do we want a theatrical release, or are we planning on a Netflix streaming platform release? Whoever is budgeting and funding this has decided this. But we're gonna make Warpath 2. Right, that's what we're gonna do right now, and we're gonna cast it. It's Warren and Aaron Productions. Warpath 2. First question is theatrical release or streaming release.
We're WAP.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's funny. There was actually a script I wrote back in 2010 or maybe 2009 or whatever that accidentally could actually function as a sequel, because it's about a hitman that's on the run. I had a theme that I tend to go. I was going with at that time, basically of a hitman who's captured by a bounty hunter in Canada, who's being taken back, but he's actually not being taken to the police, and he's trying to escape. So I was oh, that actually could be a Warpath sequel should I needed it.
Dust it off. That's our sequel. That's our sequel.
That's the sequel. Whenever possible, I try to go theatrical, but I also know that if it's a sequel to a movie that was mainly playing in VOD, it's probably going to make sense to have it on streaming. So
I know what this is.
If I have to settle for a Netflix release, I'll be fine with that.
I'll tell you exactly what this is. This is Warpath is El Mariachi. And now, because it took off and it got that inertia behind it, now it's Desperado, right? So your part 2 is actually a re-envisioning of it. So now we're picking off with Joel on the run, right? He's got people after him, right? The bar scene where all those bounties went off, those bounties have skyrocketed. So every hitman wants a piece of his ass. We don't know where this takes place, but given that you keep the same cinematographer and the same core crew, it doesn't really matter. It could take place anywhere in USA.
Although,
are we bringing back
Netflix would insist that Gary gets recast as Jason Momoa.
Yeah, that was my question. Do we have a lot of leverage here? This is your IP. This is where you fight for it. Do we keep Gary in there as the lead, or do we give him a featured extra role? Netflix is like, look, I got Jason Momoa on a 5-picture deal. I need to put him in something, but like, you hold the ultimate cards. What's your choice?
I feel like when you get to that league, it's almost like I don't even have a choice. It depends on who's funding it. So they would say, yeah, Gary's fine or whatever. But if we have Jason Momoa on standby, I'm like, I guess we're doing Jason Momoa, and I like Jason Momoa. I also like Gary, so I would be fine with either. But I feel like when you're at that stage, it's almost like, here's my opinion. They're like, yeah, whatever. We've already made the decision for you. It's like, oh, okay.
Nope.
Yeah, classic studio.
We are backing you. And we're bringing our minimal stipend lawyer with us to this, and we're staking Gary stays. Gary is our lead for this.
I would love to have Gary stay. I would just want a bigger budget.
So now, you got the budget like this in this thought exercise. You've got the box office budget.
Legally not binding. I'm kidding.
So now with the story, right? He's taking off by himself. Do we incorporate the old cast members as flashbacks, or do they actually have roles in it?
So in this hypothetical Warpath 2, I wouldn't really base it on the script I wrote years ago, because there was a lot of problems with it. Like, I always kind of envisioned like a sequel to it in those moments. Like, I've always had this idea for a short film that would act as kind of an epilogue with the Joel and the Mitchell character sort of reuniting for a bit.
That could be cool.
But I always kind of imagine it being like not quite like an Unforgiven type of thing, but like taking place kind of in the middle of nowhere, or like in like the Midwest or something like that. Like a hideaway, character gets discovered, mayhem ensues, the town is under siege, kind of a thing. So I was kind of feel like there would be like sort of like a direction I would probably go in, potentially anyways. But that's why people have to go and watch the movie, rent it, buy it on DVD and VOD. So this movie ends up having an audience, like an even bigger audience, and then convinces people to make the movie. Just saying, guys.
Everybody get on this hype train.
Correct.
So I'm being serious about this hypothetical hype train. Or is this not a thought exercise that you want to do because it's too plausible?
Oh, making a Warpath 2 for the thought exercise?
Yeah.
I'm always just trying to look ahead to be like, what's the next thing? So like, I've written scripts that I want to do as a follow up.
All right.
And but not maybe to Warpath, but kind of like in this, like adjacent to it, or like in the same type of genre and whatnot. And
you know,
that's always the thing. That was the thing that I was always told as like a big piece of advice, that like, you release your first movie, let's say you get into meetings, the first thing the producer's going to ask is like, all right, what do you have next? And if you make Warpath or like a similar type of action movie, and then it's like, I got this really good idea for a teen comedy, they're like, get the hell out of here. Like, we didn't call you in for that. And I like action. I like thrillers and that kind of stuff. And so I wrote more scripts that were kind of in that vein with my own spin on it and that kind of thing. Like, that's what I would pitch, rather than like a sequel to a movie that just released and whatnot. And but plus, I think a lot of the ideas I would pitch as like a Warpath sequel are already in scripts I've already written. So, but put to better use. So,
you know what this is? This is, we're sitting around the table in our offices, and me and Aaron are looking at each other because we just picked up this hot director who come off of his Warpath success, and now he thinks he's too good to do a Warpath 2. All right, fine, that's okay. You know what? We'll birth
Look, sign the checks. I'll make Warpath 2. I'll go right in. I already got a script, a terrible one, but I got one ready. But,
how many zeros do you want? I will keep writing. I will keep writing.
All right,
just keep writing zeros. I'm just gonna keep going to the pen breaks.
Instead of the movie itself, you know, if you were going to make a second film, and you know, off of the strength of the first one, keep it action or do the rom-com, I don't care. We picked you up off of the strength of Warpath. What would the next film you make be?
As a sequel to Warpath, or just the next movie
in general?
Just a next general movie. It could be the sequel, or it could be anything else.
Oh, okay. I mean, there is a script. There is a script I wrote called Hazard Pay that I think I'm like 3 drafts in, and I'm really liking it. It's in that sort of like that same kind of action thriller genre, and it's like set in Arizona, and like, so it's kind of like as like sort of like a modern Western, and that's been one that I'm really excited about. I'm not going to go really into the plot that much. Sure. One thing I've been finding is that in scripts I've written since, they've all kind of taken place in like the Southwest, partially because of my enduring love for Breaking Bad and wanting to make
nice.
A script in that kind of general region. But yeah, so I feel like, you know, action thriller is like, you know, like the genre I really love to play in. I think that there's a lot of like, I think there's a lot more room than people think of being able to like really tell like really like subversive stories in there, or be able to make bigger points than just, you know, the action beats. Because like James Cameron, like Aliens, you know, is like a big metaphor for the Vietnam War in very easy to understand ways. And people remember all the actions and the thrills and that kind of stuff. But it's like, it tells it, but also, you know, at its core, it's a story about, you know, like a mom, you know, and her makeshift daughter, and like the forming of a family unit. And it's like, you don't need a whole lot of action beats for, you know, tell a deep story like that. It just happens to be in that, and it's a classic. So like movies by him, and even when Spielberg does action, it's like, yeah, the action beats are a part of it, but it's telling an overall bigger story. And that's the kind of direction I always like to go in with, you know, with playing with genre and whatnot.
There is something that happens in my mind when I see a film take place in like the Pacific barren now Southwest versus when I see it take place in an urban city, right? And I applied the same thing to your film, right? Because this takes place in an urban area, not so much, you know, out in the, it's kind of like a nice mix of the two. But when I see things, violence, and, you know, I can suspend belief on things that I see happen on film, especially action related, in the Breaking Bad sort of environment. Small town, can't really deal with this sort of thing. Whereas when, you know, I'm watching Warpath and I see a gunfight in a diner, I'm like, you got helicopters swirling around. You got, you know, I'm like,
it's GTA.
5-star GTA stuff going on right here. Like, this does not happen here. And that obfuscates my immersion a little bit. And so I'm all about the remote setting for sure.
I will take that into consideration. And also, how dare you criticize this guy's immersion on that? Well, it's not meant to take place in a very specific city, but we're just going to go with the idea that it's in a very underfunded police department city. That's my retort to you, Mr. Warren.
Yeah, no, fair. With that said, we will shelf, you know what, we're going to come back to the drawing board on making this film. We've got the director inked. He's locked in the next film. He can't make a film unless it's in our box office. So whatever he makes is coming. We got first right of refusal. But we're going to move forward into rating Warpath, man. Like, this is what we're here for. And we're glad that we can have our guest Casey D join us. And moving forward, I thought that this movie hooked you right away, like I had mentioned before. And the violence was not overdone. Like, there's a way to do violence poorly, and there's a way to do gore poorly. And I found myself just knowing the resources associated was like, wow, this is like not immersion break, like incredibly well done. And that goes to it
was more grounded and brutal is what I said.
Yeah, it was like approachable, I guess is the way I would put it. It's not like Fast 9, but this is like, this could be happening in an ecosystem not too far from me, and I'm just not aware of it, right? Like, especially when you have these gangster action movies, you're like, well, how below the surface is this? And the only parts that really disrupted me were those, you know, city parts. So the chemistry that you get from these actors, one, not distracting, A+ performances, because they do scenes together all the time. That's the only kind of chemistry you can get when these actors have been in class together. They know each other, they play off of each other, and it shows. So kudos to the team there. But as an overall film, right, I rate it from 0 to 100, and I base it off of, would I make a recommendation of this film for somebody to watch with entertainment value? Absolutely, 100% go see this movie. With that said, on that sliding scale, I'm going to rate it an 82.
Nice. I will accept that.
What would you rate it from your own experience? I'm just curious.
So even acknowledging that I'm not exactly the most unbiased person when it comes to, you know, my own movie and all the years put into it and that kind of thing, I feel like if it was just me watching it, having had no relation to it, maybe hearing that it was kind of like a Bay Area movie and whatnot, I think if I was watching it and like I was like, all right, you watch it, then like you go on to IMDb and go into that little star meter, I feel like I put it at like a 7 or 8. Knowing me and now having made the movie and that kind of stuff, there's certain parts where it's like, all right, if I tighten that up a little bit, or like I resolve this one little issue there, I make this part that maybe didn't quite come through as clearly, if I just clarify that a little bit, I think there's easy things that would be able to make, go up like half a point or a point and that kind of thing. I think there's certain biases that are always there of like movies. I think that to some people, I think it feels like, oh, it feels more real if there's like someone we recognize in there. That's the power of star power.
It's also distracting.
And, yeah, it's interesting, but but the way I kind of try to approach it also is that like, okay, like Star Wars had oh god,
Pine.
Who's the actor who played Obi-Wan? Alec Guinness, Sir Alec Guinness. Like he was the most well-known person in it. Like
we'll talk about that later, Warren.
But like Sir Alec Guinness was like the most well-known actor in it. He's an Oscar winner in that time. But like most of that movie is made up of like unknowns, and that was like a big issue with when they were casting it. But like then you watch it, and you get really into it, and, based on the story and the effects and how everything kind of moves there, and then you accept it and you go with it. So I try to have that sort of same aspect with like, okay, you don't really know any of these actors, in a giant significant way, but if you give it a chance and go in through, I think you can leave feeling better about the experience than what you may have gone into thinking of it. But I feel like I would rate it like a 7 or maybe an 8, with like me knowing like there's certain ways I could have improved on it to make it a little bit better. But I think like I think most people, they would never put it as like a 10 because like, oh, there's still no one there I recognize. But I think those are things that are outside of my control. So I try to be very sad about how I would approach it.
I think you're being like overly humble here. This is a solid flick, and anyone who stumbles upon this movie, it's going to be a pleasant surprise. And what this is reinforced to me is how much, we had talked earlier about the catalog of films we just don't have time to watch, and it's filled with like big name box office studio films, and it's reinforced to me that like I should spend more time seeking out the films that pull me in with a trailer with people I may not recognize. That's what this has helped me realize. Like, I'm going to get some enjoyment watching these more independent catered films.
Well, if it turns you on to watching more indie movies, then I feel like that's a good portion of my job to restore faith in films, even when it can sometimes be low. So like I mentioned, I'm not the most objective person watching this movie in terms of how I think and stuff, because I know so much of like what was there and then what I could have changed and whatnot. But yeah, I feel like, but for my own stuff, I think it's a really solid opening movie. I think that there was a lot of things where it's like if I was punching above my weight, I feel like most times I think I was able to hit it to the degree that I wanted, or if I didn't hit the way that I wanted to, I think it got there enough. Like there are maybe 1 or 2 scenes I'd probably have reshot if I could, or just sort of fix some things that bugged me for my own writing. I think I tend to be kind of humble in it just because I've lived with it for so long that I know where the strings are. I know how why we didn't get that one shot. But to most people, it's not going to, like, they might not even think it. I'm too close to the process.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
Me personally, I think, it can be distracting if the wrong million A-list actor is in the wrong role or something. I feel way more connected to a film when I don't recognize who they are. So that might explain my difference on some movie my opinions on some movies than some other people I've talked to about other movies, where I'm like, wait, no, it's great that this is a new up and coming actor, because it's just, they have much more to prove in that role because they're so new and up and coming. And so also, you can really use that to your advantage.
Also, it's like Gary Nohely, like the lead actor of Warpath. It's like most people aren't really going to know him from any famous role. So you see him, it's like, okay, that is Joel. Or Liz Clare as Sabrina. It's like, that is Sabrina. So it's much easier to be immersed in it. But I think to get to that point, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, if you have like the famous actor who shows up for like a couple days of shooting in like the Frank role, for example, then it's like, okay, people will come to it because of that person, but then they'll stay for the rest. So that's the theory that many producers often go for. So to get people watching, I get why they do that. But I think that having unknowns actually can really immerse you into the story much easier versus like, oh, that's Robert De Niro. I pretty much know what a Robert De Niro role is going to be, etc. Or like a Brad Pitt role, for instance. So, but that's getting people to watch the movie. That's half the battle. The hardest part, I'd wager, even after all these years. In
this new theater to streaming distribution hub, that I think is going to be the next big battleground, because all of the infrastructure is in driving people to theaters versus at home. And at home, you've just got an infinite catalog to scroll through, which as a filmmaker, I don't envy at all. But Aaron, you've got to give us your rating.
So My only hangups were, Warren brought up one scene where they were in that cafe, and it should have been like a GTA. I don't know. That's a dumb reference, but please track my stupid logic. Yeah, that should have been like a 5-star thing. And then there was one scene, it was the turning point of the film, where Joel is about to kill this police officer for the job, and he doesn't follow
at the
through
beginning.
with it. Well, yeah, it's a great turning point, but the only thing, my only complaint about that scene is not about the direction, it's not about the editing, it's specifically with that police commissioner. I feel like he should have been a little more distraught, considering his son was in the room and he was inches away from death. But that's on that guy more specifically than anything else. Yes, he's a hardened cop after years of being a cop.
I'm agreeing with you, Aaron. I'm agreeing for a different reason. Joel walks into there with the thought to kill this cop, and he doesn't even cover his face. Gary's a handsome guy. I look at him anytime I get.
He was very handsome.
But
at
that point, Casey, at that point, I was like, oh, especially watching him beat the crap out of these guys in the first scene. I'm like, oh my God, it's gonna get messy. Gary's gonna off this cop and his son. I'm here for it. Yes. And then he lets him out. I just like threw my hands in the air. I was like, are you kidding, Gary? Like, dumb move. You deserve to die now. Joel, not Gary. Joel, you deserve you deserve whatever happens as a result of this.
Well, I'll say that scene was one of the hardest ones for me to get right, because initially it was actually the scene was actually much longer, and there was a whole middle section that was cut out just because it diffused a lot of tension, and I was trying to keep it up as much as possible. I think one thing, if I was ever have like reshot the movie, I probably would have set it in a different location that I can like screw up more. I can like, you know, tear down walls or like have like make it look like a much bigger fight. The place where we shot it, and it was kind of felt like it was kind of like a museum, like you can't really touch much of the furniture, and it was a last minute change, and totally very thankful for the person who let me film there. But like that's one of those things where like, okay, I would have like built a set, would have had like you know bullet holes in the wall, probably a lot more like makeup and that kind of stuff. And that's a scene where I think there's things I would have years ago I would have reshot if I had like the bigger budget. But that's one of those things where I totally get your point on there, and there's things I would agree with on stuff, but. Yeah, I will say that Cole Panther, who does play the role, I think he's a really good actor. He's one of my favorites in and working with, especially. So I get your point, though, and that
was a great scene
in
dialogue.
Yeah, there's always a certain kind of rhythm to hit in a scene. Sometimes it's tricky and that kind of stuff. So I get your point, though, and it was a tricky scene to shoot and to do. I will say, but I'm very proud of how it came out, though.
I would say I want to give the movie an 80 because of those little things, that come along. And Warren points out a lot to me. I nitpick too, so please take that with a grain of salt. but I would put it at 80 for that, because I still enjoyed the ride throughout the way. And there were a lot of scenes where I was like I'm not the most emotional person, but when a movie makes me feel or get tense up in just because of the suspense of the situation, then I'm like, all right, that was great. I'm fine with that. And there's a lot of scenes where, you feel like a character's just, Eric, the actor and his character's name, was like choking the wife of Joel or the girlfriend. And it's just, I was like, well, they were really committed to that, because that was pretty tense. I was pretty tense at that scene. So
that's one reason we go to movies. It's to feel something, like I'll watch The Room any day of the week, more so than just like fairly average drama, because rightly or wrongly, I'm gonna feel something. I'm gonna be entertained to all hell. And if I watch like an Oscar drama that doesn't, that is okay, but like doesn't, didn't really move me either way, it's like I just put Tommy Wiseau back on. I give me more of that guy. Because I know I'm going to feel and I'm going to love it. So
4 more scenes of the same sex scene. 4 more scenes of the
8 minutes sex scenes, right? You went in the opposite
same one.
You mentioned before, why didn't you have sex scenes in it? I'm like, I could have done that, but I don't think that.
The scene, the dialogue, I don't know how much is improvised and how much was written. The scene where Eric is talking about babysitting Liz, and he's talking to the third hitman. He's like, got to watch my kids thing. He's like, your son fucking sucks at soccer anyway. That was great. Like little things like that, just like chef's kiss. But the other scene that I thought was really powerful was not powerful, but like I was like, I don't know what to do here. It made me feel something, was when Kyle and Joel and Kevin Lyle, Eric and Gary are in the living room, and like he's trying to save his ass, and Kevin's like, he's lying. He's like, I'm a narc, I'm a cop, or whatever was happening in there was really compelling.
Thank you. It was a really hard scene to shoot, just like emotionally, and just like everyone kind of keeping into their emotional zones and like getting right intensity. I mean, I don't know if I should even mention, but like one of the things about it, it's also a big sound design thing because, and I'll give credit to Will Storkson, the sound designer. He was amazing throughout the entire movie. He really gave it that extra feel. Like he gave it the physical sounding weight to the entire movie. And he also gave me a lot of really good editing notes, like even in that advanced stage. But like in that one, like we had some of the actors come back and just do like a lot of like ADR dubbing reactions to stuff. So even when you're not seeing like Sabrina or Liz Claire in that case, she came in and she was doing like reactions during that scene of like just like crying and whimpering and groaning and that kind of thing. That like you don't always see her, but you're feeling her presence the entire time. Or just extra fight scene, just like grunts and hits and that kind of stuff. Like, you know, it's stuff you don't even like, if it wasn't there, you'd notice it. But the fact that you don't notice it, it's a good thing. But like you feel it. And like, so those are like just those million little things that go towards how we perceive a scene. And so I thank you, because that was a hard scene to get right, but I'm very proud of how it came together.
This film has a lot of tense moments and in intense moments. How did you, because I'm imagining, all right, we got it from that angle, switch it around, take about a half-hour setup. How do you keep the energy in that small living room to shoot? Are you like just accosting the actors left and right and like, you know, calling them worthless? And how do you keep them motivated? Or are they just all professionals and just sort of like hop and do a scene, one take and done?
Is it a Stanley Kubrick method where an actor only shines at their 90th take or something?
Well, this is indie films. We don't get 90 takes. You get like 2 to 3 takes at most. And even then, you should only be doing part of a scene because it eats up time. I mean, every actor was different on there. So like Eric, who plays Eric, he very much tries to get very method and very like especially physically method with it. So like there was a scene early on when
Eric's intense, man.
Yeah,
he's a very intense guy.
He's an intense human. He didn't have to sell me hard on being a psychopath.
Well, if you buy it, then he did his job really, really well. But there's a scene early on when he's like interrogating that one guy in the warehouse, and it's supposed to be like he's been doing it for hours. So like to get the right amount of sweat, he like did like 10 laps around the warehouse we were shooting at night,
really,
and like right before we shot, and so he just looked drenched. And so he's keeping up that kind of intensity. He would go off in his own little corner, and he was listening to a lot of like super heavy metal, like in between takes, to kind of keep that energy up. Liz was very calm. She was very like, she kind of kept her own self, but she was like, but also was just cracking jokes in between. Gary was kind of keeping in his own like emotional state and was like, so there's certain actors you kind of feel like, okay, I feel like to get them at their best, we got to shoot their coverage first. And other ones where it's like, okay, I think like they're keeping it consistent, so we can save them for last, and then just try to figure out, what that is. But yeah, I wasn't shouting in anyone's ear. I wasn't like physically assaulting anyone. Like I'm not famous enough or powerful enough to get a BS like that. So my job was largely just kind of stay out of their way and just make sure that they didn't like skip any lines and just figure out what order to shoot them in, and just don't get in the way. I think that's a big thing of directing I learned when they're in the zone.
I love hearing about those types of things like during the production, because it really shows like how committed some people are in the project. And it seemed like everybody was committed to this, but I'm mainly talking about like Hollywood movies. When you can tell someone's not committed to this, it feels like a very cookie cutter call from a producer or something where it just doesn't shine. So to learn about Eric running around and listening to heavy metal in between takes, if I had to only take away one thing from the film, it's his intensity for sure. Like, amongst the actors, it's his intensity. And I like hearing that's how his process was. It's very cool.
Doesn't surprise me. That's so funny. What was it like, because you had that small snippet with David Wahakin in there in the chair. Did you have to and you kind of shot it like a fever dream a little bit with like the distorted voice with him screaming in the background. Right. But that still required an actor to kind of like get into that moment. Was there anything necessary to pull from? Did you have to pull anything from any actors for a lot of these intense scenes, or did people just show up?
I think they largely showed up. I think one thing that, especially for the actor, because like roles like David, for instance, he was a guy that that Gary had found and cast, and because he was a scene, but they had done several scenes in acting class together. So I think that me and Gary were very aligned on the tone of it and what and like what the feel of the movie should be, and especially like acting style wise. So I think they were working together a lot in the build up to it, and like, if anything, I was kind of deferring mostly to Gary to get him in the right zone because they knew each other really well. Yeah. So I think him and Eric were working a lot together for getting that, especially because they're supposed to be best friends, and oh my god, they're really good friends in real life. So they had a lot to build on from that. You didn't have to take them out to a bunch of dinners beforehand to have them figure out who they are.
Yeah.
So
all of that sort
fun.
of lead up stuff that happens when you bring maybe 30 strangers together to put together a piece of art, that wasn't necessary here because everybody had this rapport from just being in the same vicinity and just working. Yeah, just I don't know how to say it, but I think you get what I'm trying to articulate.
I think a lot of if there's aspiring directors who will be like a PA on set and they want to see how directors work and that kind of stuff. I feel like in a lot of times, especially because I've been in that position, sometimes you don't really get as much watching other directors work, because I think at least the really good ones, a lot of that stuff was already figured out well ahead of the shooting. So they're just they're just going in, they're doing their thing, and then directors all right, a little louder, a little faster, more intense. Especially if they've worked together before, it's they already had their language worked out, so you're not seeing the bonding process as much. They're already just kind of going up, it's oh yeah, is that line? Yeah. We'll change that around. Okay, good. And it's all right, that's okay. I guess that I don't know what I'm supposed to take from that, but that happened. Having worked with all the actors in this one and that kind of stuff, and every person having our own different style with communicating the role and that kind of thing. A lot of that was done well before shooting, and then by the time we came on, it was just adjustments or adding a line, taking away a line, trying some different approaches. But acting wise was probably the smoothest part of the whole process. Making a movie, they were the least I ever had to deal with. Most of it was from and the amount of locations. Basically, because I joke that every day we were shooting, it's basically we were laying down tracks for the oncoming train every day, because it's coming and you got to make sure that it doesn't derail. So they were able to make it so I only had to focus on on being creative and some other things that took my attention, along with the other stuff with the producers of them also taking stuff off my plate. So I got to just be creative for most of it.
How much of the script or in the acting or the scenes were altered versus what you written versus were you even tolerant of the changes, especially since the actors knew each other? How much of that was written verbatim versus no, he said this word or this came out, we're going to keep it?
I would say probably about 87.25% was pretty much verbatim, minus maybe a few words here and there and that kind of thing. But that joke you mentioned earlier about the kids sucking at soccer, I will graciously note that was actually a joke I came up with. That was
nice.
In the script.
I was worried.
Excellent.
Yeah, but most of it was fairly verbatim, but there was definitely within certain lines, there were certain ones where it's okay, this line of dialogue is 3 sentences long. I'd ask them if there's a certain ways that just for them to make it feel more natural to their character and that kind of stuff. Because sometimes my dialogue can be a little fragmented, or it's it's 4 sentences, but maybe you only really need 3 or 2.5 or something like that. So there's little ways I would just kind of encourage them to try stuff out. So some of them just went verbatim and they didn't change anything. Other ones, tried a couple different things. But I was always trying to keep them within don't introduce a lot of elements in lines of dialogue. Just kind of keep within the structure of it. But you can play with the phrasing and stuff. And that's where some of the extra F-bombs in the movie came from. Some of which I took out in editing, some I left in, and then other ones I couldn't get rid of because they were too embedded in the moment that I needed. So, because that's the thing that I think that if there's too much cursing, it can make it feel a little amateur, and it can just feel excessive. So there was a lot that I cut out, which goes to show how much was improv. But yeah, the actors largely kind of kept it to the script, minus very minor adjustments or that kind of thing. So there wasn't any monologues that people were just improving. It was all the structure was there, and they just got to play around with some wording.
Dude, okay. I mean, end to end, whatever you did worked, and I'm thankful for you joining us here, completely acknowledging it's watching films and watching the audience reaction is one thing, but then having a discussion about your work specifically with two shitheads who don't know what the fuck they're talking about is completely different. So we appreciate you joining, and hats off to the people who enter the theater and the performers, because they're the ones putting it on the line. We are just two observers who risk nothing by talking about it. So please, everyone watching, we appreciate you, and take what we say with a grain of salt, because we definitely appreciate your performance. And we appreciate you, Casey, again for sitting here joining us with this. With that said, is there any parting words or tips you would give if you were to do this again for aspiring filmmakers?
First off, thanks for all the words you said. I've had a ball just doing this podcast, and I love talking about the movie. Like there's parts that I still kind of get a little pained about when talking about it. I have a really good time talking about it. I'm very proud of the movie that came out. As much as I may sometimes dog on my own skills at times, I am very proud of the movie. I've seen enough times to know what works, what doesn't, and I'm still super freaking proud of it. Now, as for parting words, my thing is I hope people see it. I hope they watch it and they have a good time. My overall wish, people would see it in a theater and then they immediately leave to go to a bar. They have a really hard drink and they talk about it with the person they just saw it with. It's so what the hell was that? Then 10 minutes later, they're talking about other stuff with them and just going over all the different little things they liked or if they hated it, bag on it all you guys want, as long as it gets some kind of reaction. So for any pro tips for anyone who's either wanting to make a movie or anything like that, I don't have any giant big ones that would be eye-opening, but I would say that there's always the big piece of advice of that technology is getting has made things way better at a way lower prices. There's a lot more resources now to be able to make a movie and actually have it look really solid. So there's almost no excuses anymore to do something, so you do it. I would also say to remember that there is an audience, that if you want to continue working in film, you have to just be aware of that an audience is meant to see the movie. I always keep that in mind in terms of just trying to make sure I don't go too far up my own butt in terms of artsiness or things that I think they'll obviously get all this stuff. It's actually sometimes you need to make add in those little exposition lines. Basically just trying to making sure I'm not getting too self-indulgent at times or too inside, because if you want to keep working, the audience is going to be there at the end of it. It's not just how do I feel? And then I like that movie, I'm going to keep it on my hard drive. Getting an audience and entertaining an audience, that's the biggest thing. Not every movie is really meant for an audience, but just always remember there is an audience that will be seeing your movie. So just don't forget them. That's my only big piece of advice. I think that's something that gets kind of ignored when the easy bit of advice is the inspiration. It's inspire, but also remind them people are meant to see this. So for any parting piece of advice, that's what I would offer up.
I think that's pretty valuable advice in an attempt to provide a synopsis. Don't go up your own butt, and remember that this has an audience and it's meant to be consumed. I am of the camp that the world could use more art. Don't hide it. And even if this is your masterpiece, brain baby, smell your own fart film, still show it to people. I don't really care. It's meant to be out there. But again,
I'll never discourage anyone from making a movie. But yeah, it's one of those things. Not saying what you do or don't do. Just don't forget there's an audience. So interpret that how you will. But yeah, I will never discourage anyone from making a movie.
That's great to have that level of foresight in the process of it all. In the process of a crazy production where you have to meet all these deadlines, you still have to have that foresight. So that's very that's great. I love that you said that.
Thank you.
Well, people will be able to find the film because we are going to link to it in the description directly on Amazon Prime. Like we said, you can find it on multiple platforms, but that's what the link we're going to provide below is going to be. But thank you guys for watching. Aaron, thank you for joining me. And Casey, thank you for sitting in the hot seat. Once again, I'm Warren, that's Aaron. And this was Movie Talk.